Welcome to this new edition of Business Africa. I'm Ruth Lago. Here are the headlines. Madagascar's economy is expected to grow by 5% despite health crisis. According to projections by Madagascar Business Group GEM, the private sector awaits feedback from the state officials. In Kenya, 5% of vehicles will be electric by 2025, a project that would allow cars to make significant savings and thus help protect the environment. Finally, in the far north of Cameroon, onion production is the main source of income for hundreds of families. Before the coronavirus pandemic, the Malagasy economy was on an upward trajectory. The pace has accelerated over the past 5 years, reaching an estimated growth of 4.8% in 2019, a record level over 10 years. In 2021, a group of private Malagasy companies expect a growth of 5% despite the health crisis. And to achieve this, the collaboration of public authorities is expected. To shed some light on this, Thierry Rajaona, the president of GEM, joins us from Antananarivo. Thanks for joining us.
Merci à vous. Bonjour.
What are the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, especially on Malagasy private companies?
Madagascar was on an upward trajectory. And unfortunately, 2020, the year of the Covid-19 pandemic, has had a catastrophic impact on the Malagasy economy. We have officially experienced a 3.8% decline, which has not been seen in over a decade. From the moment that external markets closed down, whether it be in services or the industry, this has had an immediate impact on the Malagasy economy. To mention only two major sectors, the first one is tourism, which directly employs about 45,000 people and supports more than 300,000 in Madagascar. Overnight, we had particularly zero tourists. Another sector that was also developing strongly was the mining industry. As you know, Madagascar produces nickel, cobalt, and ilmenite. We have about 6% of the world's production. But not only because of the closure of the Chinese and American markets, but also because of the sharp drop in the price of nickel, which is at a historically low level. The plant closed from March 2020, and this has caused a sharp drop in exports.
A growth rate of 5% this year despite the crisis, but the private sector will not be able to do it alone. Going by your words, how can that be achieved?
Given the global context and the local economic policies in Madagascar, we doubt the country's ability to achieve this 5% growth rate. At the beginning of the year, the World Bank and the IMF have issued more modest forecasts. The IMF projected a growth rate of 3.2%. The World Bank was more pessimistic, forecasting only 2.1%. But we naively thought that it was quite possible to have a significant turnover of around 5% if the authorities adopted Keynesian stimulus policies with massive investments in infrastructure, which we really lack, and also invested in agriculture. For example, Madagascar, which is one of the biggest consumers of rice in the world, the third largest per capita, could, instead of importing 10% of its rice, be self-sufficient in a very short time, and maybe even export rice to Africa. We have this capacity to bounce back quite quickly by investing in infrastructure through debt. I would like to point out that despite the fact that many African countries are over-indebted, this is not the case of Madagascar. The country's debt rate is one of the lowest in Africa. It stands at nearly 40%. We have the capacity to significantly increase our public debt, either by increasing the number of foreign partners or by draining the national share.
auprès des partenaires étrangers, soit en ponctionnant l'épargne nationale.
Parlons à présent des prêts octroyés par...
Tell us about the scheme for obtaining loans granted by the banking system to SMEs. Would this be a favorable solution?
L'économie malgache.
Des lignes de garantie ont été faites à partir de...
Guarantees were made thanks to a World Bank loan that made it possible to insure up to 75% of cash flow credits or investment credits that were a real lifeline for both small businesses and small and medium industries. This guarantee was just set up at the beginning of the year. It is true that the pandemic started a year ago, but better late than never. And we think that this guarantee that has just been put in place will be able to help. But this help will be quite limited, as these funds amount to $24 million, which is a relatively small amount, in our opinion, compared to the needs of the Malagasy economy. But it's better than nothing. And we hope that in the second phase, once this guarantee has been completely exhausted and we have seen how effective it is, the authorities will be ready to expand and put in additional large amounts.
Merci à vous, Monsieur Thierry.
Thank you, Mr. Thierry Rajaona, for responding to the various questions on this edition of Africa News.
Business Africa.
Merci à vous.
5% of vehicles will be electric by year 2025, an ambitious project launched by the Kenyan government. The East African country wants to strengthen its environmental policy on the reduction of gasoline-powered cars. The new law has already succeeded in persuading some transport companies who now use electric vehicles. Raphael Tambanier and Kizi Azala reports.
Alpibus, a Kenyan startup, is replacing vehicles' gasoline engines with electric ones and has a production line capable of transforming a diesel engine Toyota Land Cruiser into a cost-effective electric vehicle.
Fuel is literally the most expensive commodity in this country right now. It keeps fluctuating, and it's just a pain to any car owner or any motorbike owner. So our vehicles are electric, which means you save on fuel. If you are using 15,000 shillings, for example, on fuel per month, now you use 1,000 shillings only per month to charge your vehicles, to charge your batteries.
Alpibus takes out the fuel system motor of a vehicle and puts an electric one in its place, as well as a battery pack and electronics, avoiding the unnecessary construction of a new chassis by using cars that have already been manufactured. The company is also in the final stages of a set of electric motorbikes. These vehicles are much more cost-effective and better for the environment.
Before I started driving this electric vehicle, I used to drive a fuel car, and in a day I could make about 3,000 Kenya shillings, out of which 80% of the money could go into car maintenance and fuel. But with this electric vehicle, I'm actually enjoying. I make more money. I make about 3,500 shillings in a day. And all that money actually goes into my pockets.
Safari vehicles have also turned electric at Kenya's Masai Mara National Park. Alpibus is in line with the Kenyan government's target of 5% of all registered vehicles to be electric by 2025.
In the far north of Cameroon, young people have decided to stay in their villages and grow onions as their primary source of income. In the villages of Waza, Doublé, and Makelingai, the most prominent activity is onion production, which amounts to 300,000 tons per year. A report by our Cameroonian correspondent, Joel Kwam.
Roland has decided to stay in Godola in the far north of Cameroon. He's following the footsteps of his parents and friends in growing onions.
You know, it depends on the means of each one. In general, it takes 4 months to produce these onions. After transplanting the seedlings, we spray water, and after 2 months, we come to plow.
In spite of the difficulty, Abba does not intend to stop because his onions are highly valued in Kuseri and on the Chadian markets. In Doublé, cultivation is still very archaic.
It is part of us, and that is why we are here. All our young people have stayed in the village because the onion has kept them there. Otherwise, we can always travel, leave our village, and get money in town.
The onions are very popular in South Cameroon, especially in Yaoundé and Douala. Here in Maroua behind me, trucks are waiting for onion shipments from Godola, Mikilingai, Wassa and Doublé. Production in the far north region is estimated at more than 300,000 tons, making it the main onion-producing region in Cameroon. The onions will be sold on local markets in Yaoundé, Douala, Bafoussam and Batois. They'll also be shipped into Chad, CR, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea and other West African countries.
Merci de votre fidélité à ce numéro de Business.
Thank you for staying tuned. Keep watching Africanews or download our application in French and in English. I'm Ruth Lago. See you soon.
Je suis Ruth Lago. On se dit à très vite.